Good morning, good morning. This is the 8th episode of FAFO and Chill, in which the Chainstack Developer Experience team talks about the various things that we've been building and exploring within the Web3 space over the past few weeks. In classic Web3 fashion, we spent a lot of time building various different Web3 tools, as well as keeping up with latest news and exploring the space in general. FAFO and Chill is where we talk about these things and dive into the world of Web3 tech. Specifically today, we have a pretty interesting conversation. We're going to cover some recent events, things that have happened over the weekend, specifically surrounding Vyper and reentrancy exploits. We had Curve along with a few other DeFi protocols that almost collapsed over the weekend as a result of one small exploit in the Vyper smart contract Python-based language that just made it very easy to essentially drain various different liquidity pools with wrapped ether. So a lot to explore in this area. It was a very interesting kind of spotlight of the importance of security, the importance of auditing. And I think personally that this recent exploit, this thing with Vyper, hopefully, in my opinion, I think it's brought security in Web3 back into the limelight of the community. And I think going into the future, it's going to continue to be far more of a priority than potentially it was before this whole exploit happened over the weekend. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about Vyper and everything that happened, I think it was Saturday, Sunday, Monday, as well as what's continuing to happen. So we'll talk about that along with a few other potentially related topics. But before we dive into that, as usual, we have three main speakers here, potentially more in the future. But to start with a quick introduction, number one, you have me. My name is Ethan. I go by the alias Tabasco online. I am the developer relations lead here at Chainstack. With me, I have Ake, our director of developer experience, as well as David, our developer advocates lead. So what's up, guys? How are you guys doing today?
Hello. That's never a dull moment in crypto, or in Web3 in general. This is so much fun. So for Vyper, I was recently, probably last week, I decided I really want to get more into Vyper. And everybody, all the resources and everything I was reading up and learning and, doing Hello Worlds and all this and that stuff. Because I was recently getting more into Python for some reason. And I like Python. I think I started to like Python a lot more than I did before. Just nice to explore this. So Vyper was like a natural thing that I was thinking I should do, just for fun. And all the resources I was digging into and all the videos I was watching, there were two main ones, two main kind of trends, or two main things that everybody was saying. One was, first of all, I think Vyper was started by Vitalik, unlike Solidity, which I think was started by Gavin Wood of Polkadot. Everybody was saying Vyper is very, very safe, right? It doesn't have all those like overflows and all this other stuff. What was mentioned specifically is reentrancy. It's safe against reentrancy, this reentrancy exploit. That was one. And the other one was most of the developers who are good at Vyper were working for Curve, which was, it was just, it was last week. I was like, wow, this is interesting. I'm getting into, I think I'm gonna go into Vyper, and there are not so many resources, so you can do so much in this. And I was really liking this, and then this happens. This exploit happens. It
was crazy. It was, it's funny because people usually tout Vyper for being, like you said, more secure, not only because, of course, I think you mentioned earlier, but it's like a sequential language because it's Python based, but also because in general it just has fewer features and solidity. Yeah. It's less dense, which means that it's less prone to various different security threats. So seeing exploit of this magnitude happen, it was specifically happening with smart contracts written in older Vyper languages, Vyper versions, as far as I'm aware. And as far as I understand, and maybe Ake, you could share your understanding of the situation as well, or maybe David, if you're kind of up to date with that too. My understanding is primarily that the issue was in, of course, reentrancy. So I think reentrancy decorators were broken. If I remember correctly, there was a tweet from, it was some auditing firm, but that said that there was some specific ETH variable that was set to false. It was a Boolean that shouldn't have been. I don't know. It's kind of complicated exactly what went wrong, but it was, as far as I understand, a pretty minor issue that, of course, had a kind of catastrophic reaction in terms of draining various Curve liquidity pools, specifically those that interacted with wrapped ether. I believe that was kind of the main affected area of liquidity. It was those that had wrapped ether. I believe it was 200 ETH was one of the first drainages that happened. And there's a few other things that happened after that with front running. It was like a whole battle zone almost for the first few hours. It was like all these exploiters were going and draining all these pools, and they're all getting front ran by mev bots and just hundreds of ethers flying everywhere. It was kind of crazy. But maybe if either of you guys have a better understanding than I do of exactly what the issue was here, either you guys potentially know on a more technical level what happened?
I didn't have a chance to look too much into it yet, other than from the cursor look. I think that's what happened. What you described.
Yeah, same for me. I'm just seeing how Vyper is very safe until it's not, I guess. It looks like this jeopardizes a little bit the whole system, because the founder has a pretty big loan pending on that, and it might...
You mean the Curve founder, right?
Yeah, it might cause the whole thing to collapse. Will be yet another big one to fall in this case here.
Well, not going to be the Web3 was able to withstand bigger, almost monthly
True,
hacks.
true.
I would say bigger hacks, but I would say monthly as well. Let's go to Rect News. Let me actually go to Rect News and just see.
It's been a while. It feels like
if it's
since there was a major one.
Oh, has it been? Okay.
We had this one was about $62 million. I'm trying to remember the last big exploit that happened this year. So you had this one, and I feel like it's been maybe a few months since something huge was hit. What was the last one? Of course, you had Harmony, not too long ago. That was maybe a year ago at this point. That was $100 million. You had Wormhole. You had a few other, mostly bridges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what was the last big hack before this? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well,
I think the one that I remember, I think it was Alpha or something.
Alpha
so I'm looking at Rect News. It says
Rect News is like there's one literally
July
every day.
Yes, I'm looking
It's
at
like,
Rect News.
wow. I haven't
July
checked this in a
31,
long
July
time.
30th, July 20. Okay, we skipped July 29. Then we skipped July 27, July 26 is 60 million.
Every other
Errorland.
day.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Errorland is July 26.
That was only 3 million though.
July 7th, 126 million. Oh, that was multi-chain. That was one of the last big ones. Was multi-chain.
Yeah.
I guess that was
Let's say July 14. I think multi-chain was earlier than that. That was probably the thing.
The 7th, I think, was when the bridge was hit.
Yeah.
And then you've had a few small ones since then, and then of course the Curve Vyper, $69 million on 4 pools. That's crazy. And you see on Rect News here, it says what I mentioned earlier, which is potentially acting as sort of a wake up call to developers and to the community to change things. And Vyper in general has always been kind of like a less audited and kind of less focused on language compared to Solidity. Solidity's always overshadowed Vyper.
Yeah. Why do you guys think? Now that why do you guys think Solidity got the bigger adoption than Vyper? Are we seeing the same trend, similar trend with JavaScript and Python? What do you guys think? I think JavaScript is more adopted, more popular. I wonder why though.
You can do literally anything in JavaScript.
Although for smart contracts, what I noticed is, at least to me, Vyper is definitely easier to read. It's definitely easier, for a normal human person.
Is it?
Like you make external. I mean, you make like external functions, and you just the decorator external it's like compared to Solidity. I think it's so much easier to read, at least to me. And you don't need to do any of the web apps, right? So Vyper kinda, I don't know. I was falling in love with Vyper, and I still am. I wonder why Solidity got the bigger adoption. Was it because of JavaScript?
I think it could have been, when I was first learning, Python was what I was initially gravitated towards, mostly because, like you mentioned, the readability and the syntax, and that was what I wanted. I wanted something that kind of followed that same principle. But, now when you look back, and it's like Python is human readable in terms of just looking at it, but it's also kind of difficult to work with syntax. So it's, it relies heavily on indentation and spacing, and, versus...
That part I hate,
Right. It's kind of rough around the edges when you think about it in terms of like actually working with it, like the practicality of working with that syntax. It looks nice, like visually, But then you go to JavaScript and it makes more sense to existing developers than the kind of more scripty, like Python is usually considered a starting programming language, and it's not used in production a ton beyond it's used for AI a lot. And of course you have Vyper, which is used in some cases, but Solidity, as well as of course the kind of syntax that's based upon JavaScript and Node.js and all these different things, this kind of general syntax is almost always preferred throughout the industry. And I see these being used significantly more than Python. Like even if you just look at Web3 PY versus Web3 JS, right? The usage difference is huge. There's way more resources for Web3 JS than there is Web3 PY. Like Web3 PY is almost a little bit underdeveloped in some cases, at least from my personal experience. And it's purely because of the community sentiment around these two different languages. And it's, at least in Web3, it's clear the preference is on JavaScript and of course on Solidity over Vyper. And my thought is maybe this preference, maybe the lack of direct popularity for Vyper is what led to a lack of auditors that know Vyper well enough as a language and can audit it properly, or contributors. And I know there really aren't a ton, there isn't a huge pool of talented Vyper developers when you compare it to Solidity developers. Same thing with resources. If you want to go learn Vyper, it's way harder than if you want to go learn Solidity. It's 1 to 100 in terms of resources. Same thing with the amount of developers. Same thing with, I'm sure, the amount of auditors that can do it effectively. I read this one post that said auditors for Vyper were so backed up. They still are backed up because there's so few of them compared to the number of auditors that do the same thing for Solidity. So this is, I think, a big issue. And I mean, I don't know. The big thing for this exploit with Curve and the exploit with Vyper specifically, of course, Curve was kind of the main affected, but the issue lies within Vyper, the compilation and the reentrancy issue. So I guess for you guys, I'm curious to know what you think about how this affects sentiment around security, right? So it's, got caught using kind of a language that had a slight issue in older versions. I believe this was, I don't remember the exact versions. I had it somewhere in my notes here, but it was an older version of Vyper. Got caught using it and the exploit was found, and then of course everything kind of fell apart. So knowing this and kind of seeing almost how fragile everything was from one slight compiler issue, essentially. What do you guys think this will do to the community, to the developer community, to the security community going into the next few months now that this kind of event has taken place? And I think this is I almost feel like this is potentially more impactful to security than, multi-chain getting drained or whatever, these things that are not as foundational to the community as something that is, Vyper as a programming language is being exploited. This feels more community-wide and kind of collective than an individual protocol getting exploited or individual bridge getting exploited, something like that. So what do you guys think about that? Do you think that the attitude towards security will shift as a result? Do you think it's already shifting? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think overall it's been shifting already. I've seen many more people from the community involved into security and getting into the audits business. And
did Patrick Collins, by the way, go to, for those of you guys out there listening who don't know Patrick Collins, I'm sure everybody does, is one of the more famous developer advocates in Web3. Is he with the security company?
I think he founded it. When I was mentioning, I've seen already a shift. Yes, different. When I was saying, I think what has already been shifting, that's exactly the person that was coming to my mind. He's been advocating quite a bit for better security, better audits. And I think he's probably the only one that I see. Guy, right? Yeah, he likes Vyper as well. And he's the only one that I see really pushing this narrative and trying to do something to educate people on it. Because it's difficult to get into the audit business. I know some Solidity. I can look at the contract and understand the main problems, but really getting into the weeds is difficult, and I don't think there is much going on the education side. There is widespread list, and this is for Solidity. So imagine for Vyper, and just imagine that. And I think if Vyper is getting more traction, I think they have newer versions that do more stuff compared to older versions, so it might be able to get more tractions. Then we're also gonna need some better education. Like I tried to look into Vyper probably 6 months ago or something like that, and then I just kind of gave up because I was trying to look for stuff and there is very little education. The few things that I could find was really outdated, and I usually don't like to go to having to dig into the source code of stuff to learn how it works. I feel like it's not really the way to do it.
When I was getting into Vyper again, but if you think so, I think recently I've been seeing more people that I know, and it's just coming up as well, shifting to security, which I think is great because it's a spot that hasn't been filled as much. And there is, I think, there is tons of work to be done. They don't. I would guess they probably don't even compete with each other, like node providers, like Chainstack, right? There is, it's a blue ocean for them. I guess. I would think. I'm not sure. And then, and kudos for shout out to Patrick Collins for doing this as well. But also for Vyper, again, on the surface level, there is just so much outdated information. There was not so many resources, and it did look a little bit, or quite a bit, or I mean, unless you really dig into this, it did look abandoned. It did look abandoned. Just a few examples. You go to Vyper. I remember going like last week again, I think, or 2 weeks ago. I was doing this. You go to Vyper documentation. And they have their own version of crypto zombies, which is, I think Pokemon or something, whatever.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know. I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, see? Yeah. You know why? Because it used to be on Vyper.fun on the website, but I think they deprecated it, and they moved it to some like vyperlink.org/learn or something, right? Which is you get those links and they are not working, and it looks like they don't really want to maintain this anymore, or that's what it looked like. I think I joined Vyper Discord, and I think it was under 1,000 people, or it was like maybe 500 people. I don't remember exactly, but that's what I think it was. It did look a little, and the version is behind as well. If you compare it to Solidity, Solidity today is what, 0.8 something, I guess, and Vyper I think is 0.3. Which is a huge one. But all that said, I think this is a good conversation that you guys started. The start is comparing JavaScript to Python and comparing Solidity to Vyper. Kind of on one of the first waves of Web3 adoption, where everybody, all those developers, a lot of JavaScript developers, they just moved into something they felt more comfortable with. And while JavaScript probably makes sense in Web 2, I'm starting to think Vyper probably makes more sense in Web 3. Here's why. Again, you don't need to do web applications, right? You don't need so the focus for security is not just being able to kind of exploit a contract, or maybe get an issue at the compile time, which is also a very, very interesting exploit, to have an issue at the compile time. So while your contract might look correct on the surface, you might get this reentrancy bug, if this is the case, introduced at compilation time, which is super interesting to have. But during the previous bull run, or pre-previous, the bull run 2017, I remember there was a big talk of not just smart contracts. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but there was also the concept. It still exists. I don't see it being talked anymore. But maybe it's time we resurface this. It was something called Ricardian contracts. I'm not sure if you guys know this, Ricardian. So the concept was being a smart contract, a contract that autonomously executes and is trustless, is not the only property that the contract in Web3 needs to have. It also has to be, which is a smart contract is kind of machine readable, but it's not really human readable unless it's verified, and then when it's verified in Solidity, it's not human readable to a lot of people either. But Ricardian contracts, they have this concept of that a smart contract also needs to be human readable, right? Which means anyone or almost anyone needs to be able to read the contract, say in a similar fashion they would be able to read the normal human language, like a legal contract or whatever, and be able to spot, whatever they want to spot in this, and just basically be able to understand the contract that they're interacting with. So in Vyper, I think it fits the bill closer. It's more of a human readable contract. And security than Solidity contract. Security is also not being able to exploit this on the machine level, but also being able to exploit this, I guess, as on the human level. Being able to understand, hey, this contract is going to text me, in this way. I'm rushing into this contract and it has this, like 10% slippage or whatever. In all these other things, all these other ways in which this contract is going to be to exploit me as an end user, not me as a developer, if that makes sense. But also, I don't even know. I don't remember if Vyper contracts on either scan they can be verified today. Can they? Can they? I don't know what the state is. I think I've seen. I could be wrong. Wi-Fi contracts. Curve probably has verified contracts as well on either scan. But last thing I remember, there was an issue. I don't think if they are verifiable, they probably are. I don't think the experience is still as smooth. So this could be actually, to go a little bit off topic, or to give an analogy to this. When you remember Silk Road and Bitcoin. There were the two things that went together, and when Silk Road went down, there was kind of bad, but also it attracted a lot of attention to Bitcoin itself. So in the end, it turned out, the proverbial, this is good for Bitcoin, right? Anything that happens is good for Bitcoin. So this could be today. Today is August 2, 2023. And the events of the past weekend and this week, this could be a breakout for Vyper actually. This could be the thing that makes that people are going to look into Vyper. They say, hey, this is overall it's still much safer than Solidity. It's much more limited, but limited is probably what you want to have when you do financial contracts. It's human readable as well. There is also so much stuff that could be done, right? Which is good, developers, builders, we are builders, we know this. That was one of the reasons I wanted to get into Vyper, because there was a lot, so much more that could have been done, could be done than in Solidity. Solidity it just has a lot of people. It's not funny. It is still a lot, that can be done. But Vyper just has more opportunities, just to build, not necessarily to gain anything financially, but just to build. So this could be the breakout for Vyper, This could very well be. It'll be nice. It'll be nice.
When I first started learning, actually, I tried to learn Vyper before anything else in terms of like smart contract languages. Before even Solidity, I tried.
You have a very interested, anything you do out of the box. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
It was funny.
Walk us through this.
It was totally just out of I don't want to learn JavaScript syntax. Right. I just want to stick to Python because that's what I was working on at the time. I was working with Python, and I was like, well, if I could do smart contracts in a language that I'm familiar with, in a syntax that I'm familiar with readability that I'm already accustomed to, then why not just do that? That'd be way easier than trying to learn Solidity and at the same time learn a new syntax that I'm not used to. And because at the time it really was, I think for me it was Python and Ruby were kind of the two main ones that I was doing. I was doing a little bit of Java, but of course Ruby itself is a similar language and that's pretty readable. There's not a ton of extra characters and everything. It's very just almost like plain English. And that's what I liked because it was easy for me to understand, and that's kind of what I focused with. So I started with Vyper, and I watched a few video tutorials, and I really tried to learn it. But it was just, I found one good, maybe two, or just a very small amount. This was back in, I'd say maybe 2021. There's very few resources that you could actually learn Vyper from. Maybe this was 2022, is sometime a little while ago. But it was one major video series of 15-minute videos. Here's how you do this, here's how you do that, and then you look up how do you code in Solidity, and you have crypto zombies. I mean, you have like these huge, like very interactive suite of services, and it made it very difficult to learn it. And I think Ike, you're right in that with this, I feel like a lot of people now are like hearing about Vyper, and they're of course looking into it from this huge news story. And I think it'll put pressure on people to not only learn Vyper as a language, but create more content for it, right? Make it more accessible for people to learn and be used more. Because like you said, like if you just look at practical implementation, Vyper is in a lot of ways easier to work with than Solidity, right? You have the readability component. It's Python. Everybody likes Python just in terms of the way that you work with it. It makes it a lot more easier for beginners, right? Which is what actually attracted me to it originally. So this is, I think, a good thing, hopefully. I mean, of course, it's terrible that over $70 million were stolen and everything, primarily within Curve. But I think that with most of these exploits, you see always it comes out of this, you see something good that happens because people learn lessons, right? They learn, okay, maybe we should focus more on Vyper as a language. Maybe we should actually embrace it a little bit more as a community, as a community of developers. And then beyond this, the thing that I think will be most impactful is that, security in Web3 has always been like, of course you have a lot of auditors now, and you have people like Patrick Collins who are very focused on it. And there's a huge security community in Web3, but still, I mean, we were just looking at the Rect.news website. It's every day almost there's an exploit in Web3. So it's like, how do we stop this, right? How do you expect? And I think this is the biggest issue for security. I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter if a bunch of degens lose their money from putting it into a scam coin or some crazy honeypot contract or whatever. But what matters is when people are actually trying to use Web3 and they encounter a significant exploit, usually something that they have no control over, like an inherent issue with Vyper, for example, right? Consumer, they have no idea if this is happening, and there's no way to prevent this other than trusting in the security community to address these issues before they actually happen and have impacts. And I think that going into the future, more so than we already have, there will be a continued focus on security and, number one, utilizing things that are proven to be secure, right? So being very thorough before you implement smart contracts in versions of languages or whatever that potentially fail tests. I'm sure. I mean, obviously some part of the auditing process was missed. I believe I looked it up when we were talking. It was Vyper compiler in the compilers in versions 2.15 to 3 were kind of it was 2.15, 2.16, and 3 if I remember correctly. And on Curve specifically, it was all those wrapped ETH pools. So it was it was Curve ETH and a bunch of random tokens and stuff. And this is just like a huge issue. Like imagine you're getting a Web3 and you throw tokens into a pool and then it's all lost. It's like that's just a very easy way to completely reduce the chance of anybody ever getting a Web3. If the chance of losing money is so high that your wallet gets exploited because you sign a malicious contract or you put your money into a DeFi protocol that gets drained because of an issue in the compiler of the language that they're using for their smart contracts. I mean, it's just so. You say it out loud, and it's like these are such high level issues in terms of just like that these things need to be solved at a foundational level. But it's hard to do that stuff. It's like, how do you incentivize this? Of course, audits, but then how do you make sure that contracts are audited, right? You're going to have plenty of protocols that just don't do it or do it with like a cheap firm. I mean, it's a tough thing to nail down. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys agree with me in that sentiment or no?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But also once there is an exploit, right, and there is a malicious attack happening, which is another part of this, which is, in the way Ethereum works is just super funny that you can actually see it approaching you. There is this attack. And I think you mentioned it got, there was front running happening as well, which Web3 is just so much fun that you can actually see the attack, pull draining attack over there happening, and then others will join in and try to run in front of you to do the attacking. You wouldn't even know. Maybe it's it's a white hat hacker. Maybe it's the owner of Curve themselves trying to save the users, and then somebody's running in front of this as well. It's just so fun. But also, I think I don't remember the name of the company, and I believe there is at least one. There are probably a few as well. That have this sort of thing where they have a system in place where they monitor, for example, a multi-sig or whatever, a contract that is high value, and they monitor it. And when there is an unusual transaction going into the contract, they will try and front run this and basically drain the contract before the attack happens. So they front run the attack and get the funds out of the contract to keep it safe, which is another interesting aspect of all of these things happening. I don't remember the name of the company again. There is at least one. There is probably more. And you can manipulate stuff on that level as well. In something that was what was happening as well. And then this thing becomes like a game of who has the opportunity or the access to being included in the order that is either safe or malicious to be committed to the state of the network. A few months ago, I was thinking about this, and I was just thinking about something super stupid as well, which is during COVID, if you guys remember, when Zoom, it kind of use of Zoom skyrocketed, and everybody was doing everything on Zoom, and they didn't have those lobbies, I think, or waiting rooms implemented, and everybody was able to just crash. There was a lot of videos. So I was guilty of watching a few of people just crashing, random Zoom classes on zero. And I was thinking, what would be? It was just a very weird idea. What would be a version of this happening in Web3, right? How can you basically troll people in Web3 in a similar fashion that what would be the version of Zoom crashers in Web3? And I thought it would be exactly this. You start sending. Which is, again, I think it's a security issue, and it's just a fun thought experiment that you can actually go and do today. It's you can do it in practice. For example, you have a contract that's holding a lot of funds, for example, and you have no way, or you don't know how to exploit this, but you control it. You can start sending transactions, with random call data. Like exploit, this blah blah blah, and then just send it to the contract, and I'm sure the contract is being monitored. I'm not sure if there is a safe, like safety net or whatever, protection to the contract. But you send the transaction, and then I would say I would think I'm pretty sure you're going to wake up a lot of people who are monitoring this. And you're going to get like, hey, what's going on there? Why are we? And you can send a transaction and say, a bunch of random data, call data, and exploit, and then you can add to this like 001, for example, right? And then you send this transaction, and then people wake up, start looking into it, like Zach XBT, same zone, everybody's just alerts going up, what's going on there? And then you send another transaction, you go like, call data, exploit 002, and then 003, and everybody's going, what's going on? You don't feel inherently safe, right? Something's going on there. Are we getting trolled? Are we not? Are we going to pay a lot of money to front run those transactions? Are we going to remove the funds? You're just going to engage so many people with this, and you're going to spend some funds and waste everybody's time, but you wouldn't. Would you feel safe in this situation? I don't know, but I personally wouldn't. Now that this Vyper, again, with this, like with every exploit, you always see, hey, that was a new way to get exploited, and it was a big contract, right? So you never, I don't think, or for the foreseeable, not even the foreseeable future, but for another year for sure, I don't think I would feel safe with those. And if I'm being trolled, I would still be hesitant. It kind of in an obfuscated way. I wouldn't know if somebody's actually trying to hack my stuff, and drain the funds, or if somebody is exploiting me. And then is genuinely trying to exploit me. And at that, I wouldn't even know if it's a black hat or if it's a white hat, right? There is so much confusion around this. But also, because it's all out there in the open, in this decentralized, trustless, non-opaque system, transparent system, kind of, you'll also get, people who want to tweet about this. Again, this could be, some like the bigger people, like the influencer people, maybe Zach XBT, just trying to warn everybody. And then I'm a little bit chaotic in what I'm saying, but yesterday, I think yesterday I was looking into. I decided to check how bold, this bold token was doing, and I checked it on CoinGecko, and CoinGecko told me, be aware that lead swap has an issue where the token is traded has an issue, and it linked me to Twitter, and there was a tweet like an hour before I was checking this. So it was, they were very, very fast with trying to alert everybody that there was an issue. Should not, should be very, very, you should not cautious. Should be very, very cautious if you decide to engage with this kind of financial operation. Well, what I'm saying is, once you start in this way, for example, like sending out those transactions, or something is going on there, a lot of good or bad intention, probably good intention as well, or mostly in good intention, people are going to alert all the users, and then everybody is going to, it can easily kind of hack your way into, without really hacking, to actually attack a financial asset. And a simple example would be everybody, a lot of people they will just dump the thing. They will think there is an attack going on. I don't know what's going on, and they're good, bad, whatever. There's been so many attacks. I'm just going to get rid of this, for example, curve or whatever, token, and then it's going to dump it. And it's very interesting, because we're kind of, we have this fully decentralized system, but you can still exploit this in a way that I just described, which is not that much different from a centralized system. Because I now remember, I think in 2018, when everybody was relying for market prices, for the value of the crypto assets and whatever on CoinMarketCap. CoinMarketCap.com was, it didn't belong to Binance then. It was a very centralized system. It still is. And I don't remember what year was. I think it was 2018. In 2018, CoinMarketCap, they intentionally or not, I don't know. I think they said it was an issue for maybe an hour, maybe less. I don't remember exactly, but they misrepresented a lot of market data. Basically, they made it look like maybe there was an issue, just a bug. But for a period of time, for a short period of time, it looked like the market dumped, whereas it actually didn't dump, right? It was just people logged into opened the CoinMarketCap.com, and everything looked like it dumped, and then people just started dumping all the stuff in panic. They just panicked what's going on, and it actually made people lose quite a bit of money. And those who were in the know, it was the other way around. So it made them realize there was an opportunity to buy low and then sell high. Which is, you look into those two systems, and one is centralized, the other one is decentralized. But the centralized one is kind of, it's simpler in its setup. You just display the prices, but it's centralized in the way that you can manipulate this. But the decentralized one is just so, it's much more complex. It has the MEV, it has this and that, and it has multi-sig, and you can because it's more complex, you can find ways to actually exploit this, not on the code level, but through this other stuff. And it's part of the security as well, right? Security is a bigger issue like this, but it's also something that's fun to figure out. So yeah, the consequences of these exploits reaches far past just like the value that was actually taken from, in this case, from the liquidity pool itself. Because it stretches to social values, right? Like you mentioned, like, oh my God, like this is a crazy issue. Let's, like markets start moving and people start freaking out. And because of the transparency that exists within the blockchain, everybody can see it, right? Which is what caused, in a way, the kind of interesting component of this recent exploit. And that, you saw everything started happening, right? You saw, all these things are being exploited. People are starting to, all this crazy amount of ether is just going around everywhere. Everyone on Twitter is panicking, and people are freaking out and trying to figure out what the issue is. Auditors are posting, here's the exact issue, and basically telling people how to exploit it, and people are getting mad at each other. I mean, it's like this whole just cluster of things happening, and you can see everything happening live. You can see this transaction goes through, this transaction goes through, and then you can also see, like in this case, like you mentioned, I believe it was a white hat hacker, and there's a few, right? There's a few people that were trying to front run these issues, and there's a white hat hacker that took, it was over $5 million, I think,
from an exploiter, from a malicious exploiter for the curve pool, and he returned it back to curve, which is crazy. And you can see it, right? You can see it's like all this money's flying, and now you have like these bev bots, right, that are like trying to front run everything and take money, and whether it's for white hat stuff or not, and then you have money being returned back to curve, and people tweeting just crazy information. And it's like, this is only possible in Web3. This is like, this is a very unique situation in terms of just like everything that goes on. And it's crazy to watch, right? Of course, I'm very lucky in that I'm not a security auditor, and I don't rely on securing these insanely complicated, compilers and Solidity, Vyper, all these crazy things. But I think in general, it's like, it's crazy to watch this stuff happen, and you see it all the time. You even see it with like Bald, right? There's a very similar situation happened, and it was funny because a lot of this stuff was happening at like very similar points in time. So if anybody listening, if you logged onto Twitter over the weekend or on Monday, it was wild. It was just a totally crazy environment. But you see on one hand, of course, like, and it's all at the end of the day, most of it's just like social manipulation and stuff like that. But like, you have like the actual programmatic exploitation of Vyper, right? That happens. And then you turn around, you see a similar theft, if that makes sense, of funds through the Bald token, which is a ridiculous token, and people bought into it. But that wasn't as much as a like programmatic exploit as it was like a social exploit in terms of like, oh, here's base, right? And let me launch. And I don't understand why. Personally, I don't buy into those random tokens, but people do, and people love it. It's just like gambling, basically. It's like pulling the slot machine and hoping that the guy doesn't rug it. But he rugged it. I think that was on Monday. We were actually in a call with I was in a call with our marketing guys, and we were talking, and then all of a sudden they're like, one of our guys, he was like, oh my god, the Bald token just rugged. And we looked at the charts, and it was like straight down red, just total zero. And the guy took $30 million or some crazy number like that, which is insane. I mean, this is just every day in Web3, right? We have on Sunday, we have, this major exploit in one of the most popular smart contract compilation languages. And then the next day we have a random guy that some people think is like an FTX, SBF, like an ex-convict or whatever, went to prison, did all these crazy things, that he's the mastermind behind it. And then this guy got $30 million. Nobody knows what happened. And it's all this like crazy conspiracy theory. I mean, it's just, it's insane just watching all this happen. And I would hate to be there's two people. I would hate to be number one, a degen throwing money into random tokens, but I would also hate to be a security auditor right now. Both these guys are probably not having the greatest week right now. It's not the best time, but yeah, it was crazy watching these different things happen. And that's how it's been in Web3 recently. It's been like, full bear market swing. But to be honest, these things were happening just as much in the bull market. There's probably actually more often because you had more money flying around. You had, more people that were trying to exploit everything. But it was a super interesting news cycle the past few days. It was just, watching all this stuff unfold, and then, that's Web3. It's fast paced. Not always for the better though, unfortunately.
Yeah, and all those meme coins and Bold, I didn't even look at what Bold does, but judging by the name, I think it's a meme coin for sure. Yeah. That's also, people throwing a lot of money into all of those. I think a lot of Web3 natives or degens, or they are tired of the bear market. I think they really want the next big thing, and there is no next big thing yet, at least, right? Not in the same way that DeFi summer happened, or then NFTs, happened, and they are kind of, the travel and circus isn't here yet. So they try and make their own thing. They're like, hey, let's do just meme coins, and everybody just rushing into meme coins because there is no next big thing that they are exposed to. There is cool stuff happening like layer 0 and all this stuff, but direct exposure in the same way that DeFi summer was and promised, the promise of the DeFi in general, and there was a new word, DeFi. It's not here, or at least it's not here yet, and that's why a lot of people they just want the party. They want the party.
Right. Yeah, a lot of this stuff can be dumbed down to just people being bored. People are bored and they want something cool to happen. So, just this crazy stuff. That's just how it goes. But David, I'm curious. So far we talked about a few key things. We've of course talked about Vyper and the curve exploit and kind of what these key things have happened, how they happen specifically, kind of their effects, not only like on social movements, but of course like the actual practical movements of cash flow itself of Ether. In this case, $70 million as well as millions of dollars front ran and some returned back to curve, some not. I mean, it was all crazy. And then also with the Bold token, we saw that, just go up like crazy. Some people were made millionaires and then they lost it all. And just, basically in 30 minutes because one guy decided to rug it. So David, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this is symptoms of the bear market? Do you like this part of Web3, or do you think that this is something that we'll have to grow out of, right? Like this constant, these massive security issues, like just these meme coins going crazy. Do you think this is a symptom of an underdeveloped community, or I don't know, what do you think about all this?
Oh, well, about this, I always thought that is not what this should be about, for sure. And I have honestly mixed feelings about it, because sometimes, you just see stuff like what was a couple of months ago that the Pepe token came out, and like so many people threw like $100 at it and took out $20 million out of that $100. When you see stuff like that, I'm like, why am I not the guy that is like digging in the weeds of these things and gamble a couple $100 away? At the same time, I'm like, this cannot be what all these people built in the past couple of years. Like, there's no way that this is going to be sustainable. I keep thinking that the blockchain space in general is going to look very, very different in the next 10 years. Honestly, I believe the real DeFi applications are very limited. Because if you look at anything, and this is purely my own opinion about looking into this stuff, but if you look at any application, everything is basically a Ponzi. There is no real value created besides allowing some people to have somewhat of a financial freedom. If you look at maybe people that live in countries that don't have access to banks, or live in situations that don't have access to banks and stuff like that. I think that is a very, very good part of it. But then everything else is I just see it as a scheme so far. It's an interesting one, and it might work at some point. But I believe it's going to look very different. I don't know how it's going to look in the next 5 to 10 years, but I think it's going to be different when we're finally going to be able to have the retail people, getting in. Because applications are going to work, and we're not even going to know that they run on a blockchain. That's how it's going to be, I hope.
But here, but this is the point where, you're kind of correct, but also I would kind of disagree, because this Web3 thing and blockchain in particular, it just gives you the tools. It just gives you the tools to be autonomous. It's kind of like, I don't want to get into this, but it's kind of like the free speech, right? It's always a contentious kind of topic, right? What is free speech, right? Am I, when does my free speech stop, or does it ever stop? If it's if it's getting into the space of other people. But again, to give you an example, my first years ago, the first aha moment for me was when I did a smart contract. It was just doing the tutorial, and I did a trust fund smart contract, which was
nice.
You create a smart contract and you put like Ether or whatever tokens into it, and then you can you kind of keep it in there, but you can also destroy it, and will put the funds held in the contract into an account, right, into somebody's account. It was for me like, wow, so I can actually not go to a bank. Like if I want to create a trust fund for my daughter, right, and if I think Ethereum is going to be here in 20 years, right, I don't have to jump through all those hoops to go to a bank which is in some country, right, and just jump through hoops and just put the money in there and do this and that, and then make sure maybe when I'm not around that they can pay this out to my family. Or I can code my own thing and put it in there, right? And it's just going to be there, until while the network is running. And the same thing, and I was thinking, but what about, like if I put Ether in there, what about the price of Ether, or if I put USDT or the USDC in there, will it still be there like in 20 years? And I was thinking, same thing is with banks, right? It's exact same thing. Will the bank be there in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Will it have a bank run? Will it not? Will the country where the bank is, regulated collapse? Will the currency, be worth as much as I put in there, in 20 years? Exact same thing, but just no hoops, no legal stuff, no whatever, just a contract. So, I mean, it's. I think this part, the autonomous part, and of you being able to do all the stuff, it outweighs all the all the degen things. And degen things are.
Oh yeah,
fun,
this
right?
part here. No, in this part here, I believe the exact same thing. Yeah. For this part here, I agree with that completely. Banks are just like I don't know. There is. The reality, unfortunately, is that there is no good way to.
All right, you got scammed. You got scammed by the bank recently, right?
Almost scammed. Yeah.
Scam is not the proper word, David. But
no, but my account was blocked because my
stopped
passport
existing
expired.
for a bank.
I don't exist. I don't exist.
I mean, right?
It's super dumb because my passport. By the way, I have right here. It is expired, but it's still. The piece of paper is still here. I am here, but the bank is like, wait, sorry, cannot do that. We can't think. And it's funny because this is already one of the quote unquote good banks. It's one of these all online banks, no BS, no fees, no anything. But then still, no, with this I agree 100%. And the reality is that unfortunately there is no good way to keep your money, to keep your wealth somewhere, because banks can go, can go bad anytime. Cash is not worth anything. Almost like more time goes by, more cash is printed, and so you keep it in a blockchain right now. And then what happens? Either the value, if you keep it in some stable coin, the stable coin can go bad. If you keep it in Ether, value can go down. You can lose your private key and goodbye to everything anyway. It's difficult right now. Like there is no bulletproof option, honestly. I think with the Web3 part, we are going slowly in the right direction. There is still some work to do, I guess, but I think that's going to be really important on the long run for sure.
Yeah, I think generally like everything that we've been talking about today, from the huge Vyper exploit to the kind of meme coin run with Bald, and all this stuff, I think they're symptoms of an underdeveloped technology and underdeveloped ecosystem. Now, of course, I love the whole meme coin, just craziness. I've even developed like sniper bots trying. I've burned through lots of cash trying to do that because I didn't do it very well. But I've tried to dabble in the whole like meme coin trading thing because it's fun, right? It's just like, it's just like a part of Web3 right now. But I think in general, like we're still way behind the curve on what's possible with this technology, with decentralized infrastructure, with, just like being able to use this sort of, by infrastructure, I mean like blockchain as a technology to like, transfer value and store value and have self-custody over value, which is really important. And that's something that a lot of people lack. And when I say value, I'm not saying cash because, David, like you said, cash is volatile. I mean, fiat is something that goes down in value almost constantly, right? As inflation happens, as, things get devalued, as cost of living goes up. And so having a place to store value, right, and to transfer value is really important, whether it's through Ether, whether it's through USDC or Bitcoin or whatever else you want to use. These are really important use cases. And in general, I'm of the opinion that the potential for blockchain is so huge. There's so much of it that we haven't even gotten close to realizing yet. There's so many use cases and potential transformations and major improvements to our existing, not only financial systems, but just like how we deal with the retention and transferring of value between individuals, between corporations, between countries, right? These are things that right now are pretty primitive with the usage of different currencies in different countries and cash and like these, crazy, fiat transferring international systems that, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but there's the major one and all these things get shut down and, some countries are blocked off from using it, some aren't. So it's like there's right now the current financial system is just not clearly there's plenty of issues, and we're sitting in front of a technology that has the potential to fix all these issues. But right now, I mean, we're sitting around talking about a token that's called Bald that just went up to and got rugged for $30 million. So I think it's pretty clear that we're maybe if it helps anybody feel better, we're early. We're before any of these like major use cases of Web3 have actually been created, have been built out, have been distributed, and actually implemented. And who knows how far away we are from that. And, I think right now people always talk about, oh, we want this mainstream adoption, we want this and that. But I personally think that until we have, these use cases, these fundamental changes that Web3 can bring to existing systems, as well as the introduction of new systems and ways in which we interact with data and value, I think until we have that, then it's going to be really hard to onboard people. And I don't think that, and of course, I also love NFTs. I love all the use cases that we built out. But also, a big part of why people don't like Web3 is because they think, oh, Web3 is like those $2 million pictures of the cartoon monkeys, right? That's what Web3 is. And it's like, well, yes, it's an implementation of Web3, but it's not, that isn't Web3 fundamentally. Web3 fundamentally has a reach that's just so far beyond what we've currently realized in, kind of the trading and, the meme coins and the NFTs and all this stuff. And I do think there are a few applications that are starting to leverage this now, especially with the introduction of, especially over the past few years, the tools that enable easy Web3 utilization, right? Whether it's like fast blockchains. We've seen 1 million blockchains pop up recently that have been made for the primary intention of enabling innovative use cases, right? Web3 infrastructure, from RPC nodes to subgraphs, different data solutions that make it easier to work with, retrieve, and push Web3 data. I mean, there's just a huge number of forces that are coming together now, especially in 2023 and I think moving into 2024, that are cultivating an environment that makes it easy to realize these use cases. And which is actually, I mean, this is a big part of what we do at Chainstack, right? Of course, we love what's currently being built out with Web3, but we're also every day trying to build an environment and build a set of tools that developers can use to actually leverage these additional cases, right? To say, okay, well, Web3 currently does this. How do we achieve the next step here without having to worry about kind of the current potentially like primitive ways of leveraging Web3, right? And it's like, just a few years ago, if you wanted to truly leverage Web3 and build something, you'd run your own node. I mean, even like I remember when my first usage of Web3, and maybe you guys can sympathize with this if you had a similar experience, is that my first usage of Web3 was with Dogecoin. First blockchain I ever used. That was the first chain.
Nice.
And
nice.
I didn't know what a wallet was or any of these things. So I was like, well, how do I have Dogecoin? I wanted to mine Dogecoin because I thought it would, make a ton of money doing it. I didn't, but it was an interesting thing that was popping up at the time and the token was going crazy. So my first implementation was or usage of Web3 was downloading the Dogecoin client, which is basically just a fork of the Bitcoin client, onto my computer and using that as a wallet. It worked as a wallet, but to use it, you had to download the entire state of the blockchain onto your computer locally and keep your computer synced as like a node of sorts to interact with the blockchain, which was ridiculous. I mean, nobody can do that, right? And then of course I realized that there was wallets that stayed up to sync for you and used RPC nodes to connect to the blockchain and stuff like this. But that was my first introduction, and we've come so far just over the past like 5 years in terms of democratizing and making Web3 development and innovation easier. And every day there's strides being made in this area. I mean, we see it as an infrastructure company, even just over the past 6 months, right? With the introduction of hosted subgraphs and, even like Chainstack Elastic nodes and global Elastic nodes and these different infrastructure solutions that make improvements on the fundamental ways in which we interact with blockchain data. These are things that I think will lead to the leveraging of use cases beyond, meme coins and whatever, stuff like that. And then I think as we come across these use cases, it'll also introduce more auditors into the space. Security, as it's, I think, starting right now, will continue to grow as an ever expanding need in the industry. If we ever want to get into a place that's secure and comfortable, then, you know, at least when it comes to these foundational issues, you know, we can't have compiler reentrancy attacks like this. I mean, there are just vulnerabilities in general. Like, these are core things that I think, in my opinion at least, will be ironed out going over the next few years, as well as the introduction of new use cases, stuff like that. But that just kind of my way of wrapping all of these things around into a circle. And I think hopefully that's kind of the way it goes. And I think that these events over the past few days have amplified this future even more, because people are recognizing, like, you know, there's some issues here that definitely need to be fixed, fundamentally within Web3, especially on the security side of things, and you know, being thorough and kind of audits and stuff like that. But I don't know, what do you guys think about that kind of rant that
I agree completely. Just one minor thing to add from my side is things like this. They are always one more kind of kick in the butt, or like accelerating event towards progress. They are not regressing the industry, right? They are, you know, it might look like they are, but in general, it's just, hey, you know, this is where you need attention. This is where you need attention, right?
Yeah.
And then builders, because they love, you know, fixing stuff and just exploring this, this is like a beacon for them to flock into and fix stuff, right? So anybody out there listening, this is good for Bitcoin. You know, this is good for Web3, even though it might not look like it is. It definitely is. It definitely is, and it's better to have this done today than like in 10 years when it's much bigger, right? And can have
that's a pretty good take.
Impact.
Looping back to the meme coins, you know, when there was that mooning phase a couple of months ago, I was I was playing with that too.
Everybody
I was playing around there too.
Of course.
There's deploying dumb useless meme coins and trying to build front run bots and stuff. Miserably failed, by the way.
It's way harder to make those bots and the sniping bots than it seems. I made one not too long ago, and I was like, oh, this has to be pretty easy. It's like, you know, it's pretty straightforward. You just figure it out and you make money that way. It's just instructions basically, right? It's not that easy. I think I created this bot and I was like, oh, I'll throw $200 into it and see where it goes. And I think that has turned into a net zero. Just trying to throw it into it. It wasn't the greatest strategy, but that's how it is today. And I think you made a good point in terms of, like, right now we're in kind of a growth phase of Web3. And growth isn't always just like, you know, oh, token prices are going up and people are making cool things. It almost always includes, like, oh, there's an issue and now we can fix that. And then we actually talked about this on one of our previous FAFO podcasts, where we talked about the importance of, like, recognizing issues, whether it's on an ecosystem level, right? Whether it's with Vyper or with Solidity or whatever, or whether it's on your own individual project, recognizing when there's a problem, when there's a vulnerability, or where there's a fundamental issue in how you build it, and then fixing it. And, you know, even if that problem caused difficulties or like caused money to be lost or whatever, I mean, at the end of the day, it improves the ecosystem, and it's, you know, that won't happen again, right? Because you just fix it, right? So now you're in a more secure state. Your application or your protocol or whatever you're building is now more secure, and it's ready to be used continually. So I think, as you know, these things can always have a positive spin, and I think usually, especially because we're in such an early place of Web3, and especially if you're listening to this right now, then, you know, you're definitely early. You're probably a developer, and yeah, I think I made this post. The post that's pinned on my profile, the first tweet was that if you're reading this and you're a developer, you're in the top 0.0.001 of Web3 adopters, because
right,
you know,
right.
Exactly, you know, in maybe 20 years, if we succeed in everything, and if as an ecosystem we succeed in everything that we're trying to build, then you might see 1 billion people using Web3. And right now, I mean, the fact that there's, you know, like, you can go onto Twitter and know everybody that it's crazy. I look at Twitter and I look at developers that are talking, right? I'm like, oh, this guy has a good take, and then I'm already following him, or I've, like, talked to him before. And I'm like, I see this other guy and it's like, oh, this guy has a great take, and I see him in Discord. I'm like, oh wait, I'm following this guy on Twitter, and I've already have a message issue with him, and it's like, everybody knows everybody. It's a tiny industry right now, and it has so much room to grow into something bigger. And I think I think that my main takeaway is that these things that happen, especially over the weekend, are at their core symptoms of a underdeveloped ecosystem in a small community, which isn't bad. I mean, that it just means that we need to grow to be a bigger community that doesn't suffer from kind of these odd issues and crazy events like what happened. But I think that was kind of the major takeaway for me. For you guys, any major last thoughts or key takeaways from kind of everything that's happened over the past few days?
Neither Solidity nor Vyper aren't even version 1. I want to remind everybody out there. There is, 0.3, 0.8. That's how early we are. So, and we're already seeing a lot of, things happening, which is crazy. It's just, the rate of adoption is actually insane, insanely good. So, yeah.
Right. Soon, just keep building it. I see people all the time talking about they're building all these products, and it's just right now it's the people, and I say this on a million podcasts, but I truly believe in it. And the people that are building now, right, in kind of the downwards market conditions, there's not really any money anywhere. There's these crazy hacks and everything happen. The people that are still committed to actually building an ecosystem, that believe in Web3 as a technology, and actually believe that it can be utilized in like meaningful ways. These are the people that I think will see the most success come the next bull run, or I mean, even if you zoom out past that, like everybody wants the next bull run to happen, but that's just like one step towards kind of the end goal, which is actually fostering an ecosystem that people can use for general stuff. So I think that the people who are building now and that are still like actually creating things that they're passionate about are the people that, and to be fair, it's now a very small group of individuals, but I think the people that are the people that will be the most successful in terms of creating good products that people actually leverage, especially over the next, even just 2 years, even 1 year, if you want to look at that on a shorter scale. But I think that's kind of the main takeaway for me. David, any kind of last key things here for me?
No, just don't get rugged.
Don't get rugged. That's the way to go. Well, perfect. Thank you, Ig. Thank you, David. It was a super interesting conversation. It's just crazy the fact that these things happen. I wasn't thinking that we were going to be talking about a $70 million hack today, but we are, and that's kind of the way that the wind blows sometimes. But definitely super interesting conversation, and always. We do these FAFO and Chill podcasts every week. They are posted on Friday. We record them on Tuesday. You can find them at fafo.show. Just type that into your browser. It'll pop up our playlist. You can also find them on Spotify as well as our YouTube Chainstack. Go to the Chainstack YouTube channel, see all the FAFO videos there. We have a playlist with all of them in there. Check it out. Post them on every Friday. Talk about various things we've been building and learning about Web3 over the last few weeks. Other than that, I think that's about it. Thanks, guys.